The first is that unlike most people of my background and class, I have an infinite respect for the Indian politician. I can, see, this is what I mean. I have to say that when I was in my 20s, I didn't. I had a lot of contempt. In my 30s, I began to have a sense of wonder. But in my 40s, I can tell you, I have infinite respect for the Indian politician. The scale, the sheer scale of challenges that an Indian politician faces on a daily basis is extraordinary. It's the equivalent of running dozens of companies. It's the equivalent of being a psychologist, kind of a fixer, an entrepreneur. It's a mix of all kinds of different difficult things. It's not easy to run a country. A single constituency in India, a Lok Sabha constituency, can be 1 million to 2 million people. I mean, that's the size of half of many countries. I think we do a great deal of disservice as a rule when we generate easy scorn for the Indian politician, because it breeds a very, very difficult dialectic. My second confession is that Kapil Sibal is a great friend of mine. And I'm proud to be his friend. I've known him for 15 years now. He's been with Tehelka through its good and bad days. And I've seen him help and reach out to all kinds of difficult groups and individuals running through difficult times. Because when you live in a country as contested as India, there are always good people who are in a bad place and in a difficult place. And Kapil, as an extraordinary lawyer, has been there, as Ram Jetmalani, another lawyer who was here earlier, have been there, in a sense, to help out people in distress, wronged by either society or government or by something or the other. Kapil, in many ways, for me, is the face of the future of Indian politics. He represents what we would like to see in politics. He represents integrity, he represents education, he represents professional excellence, and most importantly, he represents a visceral engagement with people politics. He is not a politician who's been dumped onto the political firmament by being unelected by anyone. He's actually won, for me, a fantastic feat always, just like I always tell my friend Shashi. He's gone out there, hit the streets, contested and won 2 elections. Lost 1, won 2. And for me, that's fantastic. Anybody who can go and do that, make that synapse between the high end of society that most of us come from and the streets where we need to connect. Kapil, I have many questions to ask you. I want you to help us all get a diagnosis. And I know for a fact, because I have a ringside view to power in politics in Delhi, I get a great sense of it. But most people don't get a sense of the complications and difficulties of running a country like India. At this moment in time, you know, as we find ourselves between an old way of doing things and a new way that's challenging, a new world order, new information, new technologies, new aspirations, what is the single biggest challenge facing you as a cabinet minister holding 2 major portfolios?
Well, I think all this, first of all, Tarun, I must thank you for a magical morning.
Thank you.
This has been a magical morning.
Thank you, Kapil. Thank you.
Now, we've been talking about technology. A lot of the morning has been spent about talking about disruptive technologies. Well, in India, we face 2 challenges. We face the challenge of disruptive technologies. In other words, we need to use these technologies for new solutions. But we are also facing the challenge of disruptive democracy. Disruptive technologies lead to solutions. Disruptive democracy obstructs solutions.
Well said.
And we need to actually manage that. How do we convince the world what the way forward is, convince my constituents, convince disparate elements in society, convince members of parliament? And how do we actually get democracy working? Now, if you look at, say, development as an agenda, if you look at from the point of view of Medha Patkar, she has one idea of development. If you ask Mukesh Ambani, he will have another idea of development. If you ask Anna Hazare, he'll have a third idea of development. If you ask the politician, he'll yet have another idea. So how do you get diverse ideas of development itself in a democracy to work? And how do you then put all those together to take us forward? Now, the difference between the last 20 centuries and the 21st century, and there is a big difference, is that for 20 centuries we sought out information. In the 21st century, information is seeking us out. That's the difference. And therefore, there's a whole new way in which we need to actually work with each other, work with disparate elements in society, work with each other. And I think that's really the big challenge of India. And India actually will be at the forefront if we are able to meet those challenges and provide solutions for the rest of the world.
You know, we've been through a very rocky year. The ruling party has been through a very rocky year where many of its complacencies have been challenged in a very deep way by people's movements and people's voices. Tell me, do you, when you look back at it a year later, I think this whole process began in November last year. If you look back at it now, do you see it as having eventually in the long run to have been a creative disruption?
Well, you know, I don't look at it from, I think it's a learning process. I can't possibly call it disruptive. I think there was an element out there because all of us sitting in this hall, all of us outside this hall have angst about corruption. I mean, there is no two ways about it. The difference of opinion was how do we go about dealing with it? And that's really what the difference was. And I can't really sit here and criticize people for the methodologies that they adopted because they thought that was the best way forward. And there was an element of disagreement. But I think we have to go beyond that. I mean, if you look at, in my own constituency, if I look at the glazed eyes of young girls and housewives living in those jhuggi jhopadis without sanitation, without water, without education, without health services, I believe that those are the real problems of India. And I need to address those problems.
But tell me, Kapil, how does one prioritize these issues in a way that makes the right connection? Because, you know, I mean, again and again, we come back to the banalities that what we need to fix is the problems of the poor. We need to fix water. We need to fix food. But when it comes down to the actual process of doing it, we find that the political class and in many ways, far more scarily, the bureaucratic framework that we've been living with for the last 50 years is just not up to the task of pushing a solution through that works.
Tarun, I would beg to disagree with you. Let me just give you a few examples. Take education. Now, what's happening in the world today is that if we want to move forward in education, we must have our young create things. They must have creative minds, and therefore we need to change the discourse in education. And I believe the difference between the developed world and the developing world is education. Because in the developed world, for every child within the, or young man and woman in the age group of 18 to 24, for every 100 such people, about 40 to 70 go to university. And in India, that figure is 15, for every 100 people in the age group of 18 to 24. That's the difference between the developed and the developing world. Why is that? It's because when you go to university, that's where ideas are created. And when ideas are created, industry comes forward, translates those ideas into goods and services. And you have to have a critical mass of young people in the university system to be able to create those ideas. And that really is national wealth. National wealth is not GDP. National wealth is not investment in factories and industry. National wealth is those ideas created in the university system. Now, in order to do that, we need to have enough people going to college. So we had the Right to Education Act to make sure that by 2020, there is nobody drops out of school and everybody reaches college. So we have a critical mass. And by 2020, we want 30% to be people in that category to be in college, so that critical mass is created. Now, we're moving in that direction. Right to education is not something that we can make it happen in one day or 1 year. It's going to take 5 long years for that to happen. But to say that we're doing nothing about it, that's completely wrong. In fact, we are trying to create that, and the bureaucracy is moving forward. I'll give you a small example. We've been trying since 2006 to create a tablet in our country which will break all price barriers globally. Nobody believed us. And this has been pushed by government, this has been pushed by bureaucracy, everybody is with us. And we unveiled a tablet which was $3,500, which broke all global barriers, price point barriers, and we will provide it to the children of our country. These are the kind of things that this government and all governments must do. And this is what we are doing. And in my trip to the United States of America the other day, all global corporations are actually wanting to collaborate with us in order to improve the quality of that tablet and keep the same price point, whether it's Cisco or it's IBM. So these are things that need to happen, and this is how the world will change. Imagine a tablet in your hand where the fisherman can get information about where he is to fish and when he is to fish. A tablet in your hand when the agriculturalist can get to know about the weather. A mobile in your hand which with the press of a button, his pump in the field will work, and all this should not cost less, so that all information is at his doorstep. What has happened today in the world is that in everybody's home, he sees the reality, not only his own reality, but he also sees the reality of the outside world at his doorstep. That has never happened in the last 20 centuries. And therefore, there is a lot of angst there, and people want change, and the political class must respond to that change.
Can we agree, you are the HRD minister, the minister for education in this country. Can we agree on the fact that primary education has been a great failure in the last 50 years in India?
Absolutely.
You know,
It has been.
how do we go about fixing it now? Because, you know, there is a real problem. You go to village schools, and here the indictment is not, I'm not making an indictment of the political class. I'm saying there is clearly some kind of process making that needs to be fixed, that even great initiatives, you've spoken about right to education. Now the challenge will come in implementing that process.
Absolutely.
For example, I mean, I'll make a crude comparison. We have a law against child labor. But you know, you can go to Delhi and on every traffic light you'll see child labor, you know, and that's under the nose of the great might of the Indian state that the rule is flouted every day. So I'm saying we can go on making laws, but how do we initiate a kind of metabolism that delivers processes? And I think that, and I'm saying that as a challenge, knowing it's no easy thing to do, but what's the thinking on it? How do we get processes right?
The thinking is the following, and I think you've raised a very important point, but the thinking is the following. Ultimately, you must empower the community. You must get all stakeholders together, the parents, the panchayat, neighborhood, state government, central government, all must come together to take this movement forward. So what have we done? Under the Right to Education Act, we've said that the school management committee, 75% of the school management committee will consist of the community whose children are going to that school. And 50% of that will be women, that will be mothers whose children are going to that school. Now, they will take care that the teacher comes to work on time. I, sitting in my office in Delhi, cannot make sure that somebody's child is going to school in Odisha or not. That management committee has to do that. And from the 11th of November, we're starting a whole 1 year of awareness program to make sure that the community actually participates in this. And every minister I've spoken to in education in every state is on board. Everybody accepts the fact that this is the need of the hour. So there is, collaboration of all stakeholders in this particular, but it will take time. It's not going to happen tomorrow. But you're right. On the issue of children that you talked about, in mandis, for example, in my constituency, children are brought from Bihar, from UP, and they are serving there and getting a pittance. What we're trying to do is to set up a neighborhood school in that area itself. We can't force children out, but we're going to persuade the children. If we set up a residential school, persuade the children to come to that residential school, they get the idea of what education can do for them. Automatically, they'll be weaned away from that. So these are the kind of innovative things we'll have to do as a nation.
You know, Pratap in the morning session made a point. He said that he didn't worry too much about education in India because he felt that the demand for it would create would create the little schools and the little institutions that would provide education. In other words, he was suggesting that even if the government failed, the private would deliver. I'm not too sure. Would you agree with that? Or would you still say the government carries the major onus of delivering that?
I beg to differ. Anywhere in the world, as far as primary and secondary education is concerned, more so primary, more so elementary, the burden, or not the burden, but the responsibility of that has to be with the government anywhere in the world. And you will see that experiment all over. So I don't think the private sector is going to deliver on elementary education. We've got to get our act together. We've got to invest, and we have set apart 2,31,000 crores for this commitment. in the next 5 years. So that's never happened in the history of India. So Government of India is totally committed to it. But apart from that, even if you were to get children to school, the issue is what kind of education are you going to give them? The nature and the definition of literacy is changing. Literacy is no longer learning the 3 R's. Literacy now is about digital literacy. How can you actually use the information that you are going to get on the net or on the tablet and how to use it for your own purpose? The teacher's role will be minimized because the teacher will not be the sole repository of knowledge. Knowledge will filter to you through various sources, and the children must know how to access that and therefore create their own knowledge network through accessing those sources. And unless we are able to change the mindsets of parents and the mindsets of society that this is the way to move forward, and of course, even politicians' mindset need to be changed, I don't think we'll be able to get there. But that's the way we have to go as a nation.
You know, yesterday in my morning address, I mentioned how I was personally alarmed by society, Indian elites' disengagement with the excitements of science and technology. Now, I know you've also been a science and technology minister. As you frame the curricula, national curricula for education, what is the kind of emphasis we are being able to now place on science and technology? Because I remember out of my own reading how a man like Nehru was so obsessed with creating a base for science and technology in the 50s and 60s. But since then, we seem to have lost our way in these decades. Now, where are we on that? Is it going to be a big part of our agenda?
Oh, absolutely. But I have to tell you, Tarun, we are still better off than the Western world because we produce more engineers in this country, albeit not of the quality that we want. But we still produce about 600,000 engineers.
But what about the research and development work?
Yeah, well, that's in short supply because we've never really emphasized. If you look at the IITs that were set up in the 60s, all of them emphasized on undergraduate education, namely a BTech degree. You never emphasized on an MTech. Where does wealth come from? Wealth comes from research, MTech, postdocs. But all the IIT institutions were BTechs. And so when they wanted to do an MTech, they went to the United States. They never had the facilities here. That's the reason why the Silicon Valley is full of IIT people, because you never had an BTech, an MTech framework in this country within the IIT system. We're changing all that.
So there is a cause for concern.
Oh, enormous. We're going to produce about 10,000 doctorates by 2020 within the IIT system itself. And we have a plan for it, and we are implementing that plan. Excellent. So it's not as if we're not thinking of these things. But the fact of the matter is that India at this point is at the cusp of a great opportunity. And the opportunity is that if you look at the global community, you will find that in Australia, Taiwan, Korea, South Korea, Canada, Italy, Japan, some other countries in Europe, Russia, there's declining population. And they're going to get the global force from somewhere. And that has to come from countries like India. So we are at the cusp of an opportunity.
But you know, Kapil, I mentioned this yesterday again. I said, I don't think you can become a great civilization just because you have the most number of consumers or labor force. At the end of the day, the greatness of civilization comes from its ability to pursue and celebrate inquiry and ideas.
Oh, absolutely.
You know,
absolutely.
And will the educational system become more? I know you've been very much at the forefront of getting away with these examinations and stuff. But will we become a more curious, inquiry-based, you know, thinking kind of educational system?
We have to. We have no choices. Remember, the solutions that we want for tomorrow are not going to come from the Western world. You see,
I agree with you.
They're not going to come from there because they don't have the solutions for us. We'll have to find those solutions ourselves.
In fact, on that note, yesterday, you know, Tipping in the morning in his session on nanotechnology made a very interesting point, and I want to leave that with you because it's something, you have the voice of the Prime Minister, you are part of the decision making of the big deals in this country. I just want you to, he said that India was today at the cusp of an opportunity to rewrite the development paradigm.
Absolutely.
He said we were not over-invested, unlike the West, in the old ways of doing things.
Absolutely.
And we could actually change the order of things. Is that doable?
Well, absolutely, it is doable. For example, innovation is at the heart of what you're talking about. We're planning, and in fact, there's a whole statute being prepared, planning to set up universities for innovation. See, the 21st century cities are going to be built in India. They're not going to be built in the United States of America. They've built their cities.
That's right.
What should a 21st century city be like?
We need to
What should a transportation system of the 21st century city be like?
Is there some thought going into
Exactly. There's a whole university coming up on urban agglomerations. 30 or 40% of that city will consist of people who are migrated from the States. What kind of housing facilities should we give them? What kind of sanitation should we give them? Those are the new 21st century cities that are going to be built in India. And those solutions must come from here. And when I was in the United States and I've been going to Europe, I've been telling people, your economic model in education is completely wrong. Because when you come here or when we go there, you tell us, bring more Indian students to the United States of America. I said, how many students will you get? 100,000, maybe 150,000? Well, there are 200 million children who go to school in India. And if you were to actually set up an institution in India, you can access many more, and your return for dollar is much greater than getting students to go to the United States of America. So the whole education model in the world is wrong.
Tell me something, you get to meet a lot of people. Have you been encountering in these last few years that you've been at the helm of important positions, do you encounter a new kind of Indian young, a new kind of Indian youth who gives you a new kind of hope?
Oh, absolutely.
What is this person?
The Indian youth now sees the opportunity. Those who are settled abroad see the opportunity in India. They want to come back to India. Many of the biotechnologists, for example, are leaving their jobs in the United States of America to come back to India. Why? Two reasons. You get more research funds in India than you get in the United States today.
Is that true?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, that is true. You get more research funds in India.
That's great. It's true.
It is true. It is true. You believe me, you ask some young people who have come from the United States and settled in Orissa, in a state like Orissa, with labs, and they say, we're very happy because we wouldn't get this kind of grant in the United States of America. That's number one. Number two, all the healthcare solutions are going to come from this part of the world. I'll tell you why. If you want to create a new molecule and a new drug from that, you need to invest more than $1 billion. Now, it's too costly, because even the American citizen cannot afford a new drug with that kind of cost, because the price is very high. So all the health companies, all multinationals are coming to India for doing either contract research or creating new molecules. What's the reason for that? The reason is very simple. It's a low-cost economy, a very high-quality human resource base. With these two things, the cost of creating, of selling a drug ultimately and creating a molecule and taking it forward is 1/4 or 1/3 or 40% of what it is in the United States. So the result is that all the new molecules are going to be actually set up in India. So a lot of health research is coming to India. The same thing, why Microsoft is in India, why Intel is in India, because they have the huge high-quality human resource base and they have a low-cost economy. So that's happening in business, that's happening in health, and it's going to happen in education. And what we are doing, we're doing another fabulous thing which you'll be happy with, which everybody here will be happy to hear, that we have a national optical fiber network which we are going to lay, which will connect 250,000 gram panchayats in the next 2 years.
Fantastic. That's fantastic.
In the next 2 years. We have a national knowledge network that already has connected about 230 odd universities out of 604 and about 5,000 to 7,000 colleges. In the next 2.5 years, we are going to connect about 30,000 colleges and about 600 universities all through one single network. So one student studying in one university can take a lecture from a teacher from another university without the extra cost. And that will take care of the shortage of faculty as well. So this huge transformation is taking place, and this we started in the year 2006.
Tell me, Kapil, why is this not being transmitted to the people? Why do people still live with a great deal of skepticism about the government not doing enough if all this is being done?
Well, I think that I don't want to criticize anybody. I think the space there is in law a concept called occupied space. The space stands already occupied by other concerns.
I want you to cast a little. I want you to cast a little bit of light, because you have the inside track on decision making in India, in Delhi. You have the prime ministers here. You're very trusted. I want you to tell us a little bit about how we are looking at addressing some very central problems. There is a problem of the police. And I know that police reforms have been pending for a long time. If you talk to anybody in this country, there There's a problem about law reforms. You know, we know we are struggling with a lot of outdated laws, outmoded laws. And then there's this continuous problem about getting a bureaucracy bred in very old ways, attuned to a far more nimble, creative and demanding world. Is there thinking at all happening at the prime ministerial level? And if it is, what is the thinking that is going to, what are we going to do?
You must remember that when you talk about the police and some of these bureaucratic systems, a large part of them are in the state government itself, right? So the reform really must come from there.
But the dialogue can begin at the very top.
No, we have talked of the dialogue, but you remember that in many states, when the chief minister changes, the entire bureaucracy changes. The police changes. New inspectors from a particular lot come in, right? Now, what can we do about that? That's a popular government. A new chief minister comes, and he does that. There's nothing that the union government can do.
Something structurally, I mean, I'm saying you also have state governments. I mean, the Congress would also have state governments. I'm saying structurally, why can't we open a dialogue that forces states to at least put the imprimatur on something that sounds honorable and good, and so that it can be followed? You know, why does that conversation not take center stage?
No, it will not take center stage because there are too many vested interests involved. Let's be clear on that. Because the primary objective of most administrations is how to retain power. That's the reality of India. Let's not fool ourselves. Now, what we need, you see, what we have is some element of political democracy in India. My definition of democracy is entirely different. What we have is some elements of political democracy. You say, okay, we are having elections after 5 years, so that's great, that's democracy. I don't believe that's democracy. What we need is cultural democracy. What we need is respect for each other, respect for a human being. We don't have that. I mean, look at the way, we treat the unempowered and the disempowered. We don't respect it. And I think that must come from us as a society. And I think that cultural transformation, though the so-called quote-unquote democratic framework is in place, the cultural transformation which fits into that democratic framework is not in place. And we need an upsurge for that to happen.
Can I suggest something, Kapil? It's often a failure of the imagination or a failure of articulation. And it's the wrong thing to be saying to someone who's as articulate as you. But it's something I keep saying, that very often large groups of peoples are moved by eloquence, articulation, and by speaking the right thing at the right time. Why are we not seeing this kind of articulation that forces the people today very hungry for change, very discontent with the way things are, very willing to listen to ideas of equality, equity, sustainable development? Why are we not finding the voice? And that's what leadership is about. Why is the leadership not speaking out to the people and telling them, these are our problems, this is what we are trying to do, this is the kind of country we want to be, especially since the very founding of this country is built on eloquence and articulation and great noble ideas. Why are we failing that?
Well, I think we need... Well, I must drink some water before I answer that question. I think you've made a very, very eloquent statement yourself here. But let me say this to you. For the voices of sanity to be heard, you also need space, right? I think the discourse in this country is not a constructive discourse. I think there are lots of wonderful things happening at all levels. I mean, not everything in politics is bad. Not everything in the social media is bad. Not everything that X, Y, or Z does is bad. But I think there needs to be space for that discourse. I think we're lacking that space. In particular, the electronic media.
I was just going to say, we spend our times attacking you. I'm giving you this forum to tell us what's wrong with us. Tell us what's wrong with the media. No, tell us.
I don't want to be attacked 2 minutes from now.
No, but you must tell us.
But this is the problem. We go to them with great stories. They're not willing to listen. But that's not what makes news. We ring them up and say, these facts are wrong. They don't bother. And the problem is then, you see, ultimately, an informed public is predicated upon an informed press.
That's it.
If the press is not informed, the public is uninformed, right? Now, unfortunately, and I'm not criticizing anybody. I'm not criticizing. Unfortunately, the media, I wouldn't say mostly uninformed, but not properly informed, you know. And when you espouse any cause, you must marshal the facts. If you espouse a cause without marshalling the facts, you will do damage to the cause and, of course, enormous damage to the facts. And what's happening today is we are damaging the causes and we're damaging the facts. And the reality never comes before the people of this country.